So my dynasty league, I actually worked at a hotel in New Orleans, and we've all kept touch after that. My first year I joined, I had to pick out of a hat my keeper, and it was Steven Gostkowski, the kicker for the Patriots. And everybody
Oh,
want
a dynasty league with kickers?
Yep. Well, they were removed after that year because I won. And kickers are no longer involved, and the commissioner hates kickers and won't put them back. So my team name's always like something related to kickers.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello and welcome into Loftside Bantr. On today's episode, we're going to meet with Susan Curran, the Gridiron Goddess, who's very good at helping beginners, women, whoever wants to get into fantasy football. She's a great resource for that. We get some time to talk with her, pick her brain a little bit, as your drafts are probably right around the corner. We investigate the greatest two words in sports, Game 7 of the NBA Finals. We'll take a look at what this great series has provided for us. Then we'll take a look at some NBA draft news as well. Let's get over to that countdown and get the show rolling.
We are on in 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back into Loftside Bantr. As mentioned, we're going to be talking some fantasy football today, as well as NBA Finals Game 7. We'll get into the fantasy football with the Gridiron Goddess in a minute. We'll look at kind of some overall rankings and stuff like that. We'll talk about the top 10, and then we'll get kind of into that interview. Every year, millions upon millions of people decide to play fantasy football. Throwing away most sports allegiances in the NFL, you used to root for your team, but you start rooting for players and other teams to have great games, even though you might hate that team or anything else like that, because they're on your fantasy football team. And it's one of those things that we never thought we would see sports kind of gather together and go, okay, I'll root for somebody on a team I hate because they just happen to be on my team this year. So it's a great game to kind of get all that stuff out of the way. We'll look at the top 10 according to a PPR league from ESPN and their draft kit. I'm going to talk about how we feel about those top 10 players. According to ESPN, in a PPR league, so points per reception for anybody that may not know, your number one overall player is going to be a wide receiver from Cincinnati, Ja'Marr Chase. I tend to agree with this first overall ranking for Ja'Marr Chase. He's still 25 years old. He's coming into his 5th season. He has a great relationship with Joe Burrow. It's if the Bengals didn't really improve their defense and they still have a lot of guys holding out, including first-round rookie Shamar Stewart and Trey Hendrickson, both of the pass rushers they really wanted to have this year. So that offense is going to, as of right now, score a lot of points to keep up with that. Last year, 127 receptions, 1,708 yards, including 7 touchdowns, and his average catch was 13.4. So averaging, every time he touched the ball, he was averaging a first down. So great rapport, like I said, with Joe Burrow, catches a ton of passes, runs for a ton of yards, scores a lot of touchdowns. It's not like he's just making a lot of receptions and not getting into the end zone. So great kind of first overall pick for somebody looking for that. Now, in these leagues, they may not be available if you're doing dynasty leagues or you're, keeping your rosters and stuff like that or have any keepers. So if you're in those leagues, don't expect them to be around. But if you're starting anew or anything else, that first overall ranking, I think, is perfect for Ja'Marr Chase. Second overall is running back from Atlanta, Bijan Robinson. Now, I've never been a huge fan of Bijan. Coming into his 3rd year, 23 years old, still young guy, still has a lot. His career averages are off the charts. I don't know why I haven't truly been sold on him, but 304 carries last year, fourth best in the NFL, 1,456 yards, third best in the NFL, and 14 touchdowns. So he's a great running back. I don't know why. I've just never really been sold on him as far as being a go-to guy in an offense. Fantasy football-wise, he obviously he blows a lot of people out of the water with the points that he can get. Atlanta is going to be going with Michael Penix Jr. this year as their quarterback. Played a little bit towards the end of last year. Is this going to be something that they don't have a quarterback in, and they're really relying on Robinson to be the guy? So we'll see. I mean, he also can catch the ball out of the backfield. He doesn't score a lot as a receiving back, but he does score a lot, obviously, rushing the ball when they're in the red zone. So that's your number 2 overall, according to ESPN. Number 3 overall, your wide receiver from the Minnesota Vikings, Justin Jefferson. So he's wide receiver 2, but 103 receptions, 1,533 yards, 10 touchdowns. Again, great numbers for a wide receiver in a PPR league. Going to have a different quarterback this year. Going to be working with J.J. McCarthy, who is completely unproven due to his injury last year. So a little unknown for Justin Jefferson, at least for this year. Justin Jefferson normally makes any quarterback look really good. Sam Darnold looked excellent last year for most of the year with Justin Jefferson on the other end of his passes. So J.J. McCarthy in the preseason before he got hurt looked pretty good. Again, preseason, vastly different. But again, number 3 on the list is Justin Jefferson. Number 4 is Saquon Barkley, the running back from the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. 28 years old, still has a little bit of life left in those legs. Had injury issues the last few years before coming to Philadelphia. 345 carries, first in the NFL. 2,005 yards, first in the NFL. And 13 touchdowns. You're going to get a ton of points from him. Now, there's still health questions here or there, especially with the longevity of a year and having him played as many games as he did last year, especially going through the playoffs and everything else. Didn't have the greatest Super Bowl ever. They didn't really need him to because it was 40-22. It wasn't close most of the game. He ran all over the Commanders in the NFC Championship game, ran all over the LA Rams in the divisional game, and ran all over the Green Bay Packers in the wild card game. So, I mean, he has the ability to average 7-8 yards a carry. He typically last year averaged around 6. So, I mean, even he was even bypassing his per carry average in the playoffs, which was crazy. So, Saquon Barkley's there at number 4. Running backs seem to be kind of making that little bit of a comeback when it comes to fantasy football. Now, he also had 33 receptions and 278 yards receiving, so he can catch the ball out of the backfield. Again, not known for scoring touchdowns that way, but when he's running as well as he was last year, you didn't really need to have that as part of it. Number 5 is Detroit Lions running back Jahmyr Gibbs. Another person I wasn't super sold on for a few years. 250 carries last year, 1,412 yards, 16 touchdowns. So he was tied for first in the number of touchdowns. They still have David Montgomery on that roster, so you have a guy that can give him a little bit of a break. Considering he was tied for 11th with 250 carries, so he got spells in games, and David Montgomery still ran 185 times and 775 yards and had 12 touchdowns himself. So a very run-heavy team, at least last year. He's more known for getting passes out of the backfield, 52 receptions last year to go along with 250 carries, as mentioned before. So he started to break out of that. The only downside here is if you're going to get Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery is going to go relatively quick after that because of how much he does spell him. So if you're looking for a handcuff, you're going to be picking him like really close to the fact that you get Jahmyr Gibbs, and then a couple of rounds later, you're going to have to go after David Montgomery if that's what we're going to do. Now, some injuries here or there for him. didn't look the best at the end of last season as far as, well, I take that back. He had 3 touchdowns against Minnesota just before the playoffs started. They obviously lost to the Commanders in the division round. That's probably what I'm thinking about, is because they lost, he didn't have, but no, he still had 300-yard games prior to that, and then a 100-yard game against the Commanders. So he did have a good end of the year. So ignore the fact that I didn't know what I was talking about for a second. But it's one of those things that you're going to lose out on number of carries, and if David Montgomery's the hot hand, they typically will switch to him. So be prepared for that in this offense. But Jahmyr Gibbs is your number 5 overall. Number 6 overall is the wide receiver from Dallas, CeeDee Lamb. Now, CeeDee Lamb is a very good wide receiver. Very, very good. The problem is you're watching a team that really kind of hinders on Dak Prescott's health. And obviously he's had a ton of injuries that have come in the last few years that have really screwed the Dallas Cowboys' chances. He's still 26 years old, 101 receptions last year, 1,194 yards, 6 touchdowns, so not getting in the end zone a lot. At least he wasn't last year. He still was getting, 8 targets, 13 targets, 7 targets, 6 targets before they were, they didn't make the playoffs. Last 2 games of the year had 100-plus yards. But he will have games like he had 2 receptions for 39 yards against the Giants. He, has rushed the ball a few times out of this. He had 14 rushes last year, which is a decent amount for a wide receiver for end arounds or whatever the case may be. The only other kind of thought process in this whole thing was they brought in George Pickens to be on the other side. So now you really are going to get one-on-one coverage. And if they can keep Dak healthy enough throughout the season, he's going to have good numbers again, because George Pickens last year, 59 receptions, 900 yards with poor quarterback play. Now, George Pickens is also a nutcase half the time anyway, and he's going to do something amazing one game, and the next game he's going to completely lose his mind and fight somebody. So it's a typical Dallas Cowboys player, honestly. Other than that, Paris Campbell's on this roster, and Jonathan Mingo, who obviously hasn't lived up to expectations. So, those are your 2 guys. Those are the 2. So let's see what happens with that. They brought in a couple of other rookies to see kind of how that stuff plays out. But George Pickens, and then, like I said, CeeDee Lamb is number 6 on in fantasy football this year. Number 7, Los Angeles Rams wide receiver Puka Nacua, still 24 years old. 79 receptions, 990 yards, 3 touchdowns. Up and down year for the Rams last year. They obviously made the playoffs and lost to the Eagles in that divisional round. Puka Nacua played opposite Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is no longer there. Devontae Adams is coming in his place. So a very good wide receiver still on that other side. Leaves one of the 2 of them over Devontae Adams. 32 now. 85 receptions last year for the Jets and the Raiders. Back to Puka Nacua, who has proven since coming into this league, he got drafted real low in the draft, has produced every single year. I mean, he has 184 career receptions, over almost 2,500 yards. Doesn't get in the end zone a ton. Doesn't get in there a ton. He's only has 9 career touchdowns. But trying to give Stafford one more kind of go at it, getting him another weapon, like I said. So you're going to have open, you're either going to have Puka Nacua open, you're going to have Devontae Adams open on that team. So keep an eye on it early season, which way it kind of goes. But I think Puka Nacua has the repertoire to be the number 1 guy still on this team, and has the relationship with Matthew Stafford to continue improving year in and year out. Number 8, wide receiver for the New York Giants, Malik Neighbors. Now, Malik Neighbors had a great year last year for his rookie year. 109 receptions, just over 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns, with some of the worst quarterback play in the league. So he put up monster numbers with basically no one to get him the ball. Now the Giants have revamped their quarterback room. Jackson Dart they drafted, Russell Williams they signed, and Jameis Winston they signed. So 2 veterans in this locker room that know how to run an offense. Russell is not the same player that he was winning a Super Bowl, but he is still a good veteran, can make good plays. Jameis Winston's going to throw a ton of interceptions, but throw a ton of touchdowns. You're going to be really excited for him and then really pissed off at him for the plays that he makes. And then Jackson Dart seems to be the guy that Brian Daboll wanted. So I think out of the 3 guys there, it's going to be really interesting to see which one kind of takes that lead as being the number 1 guy. Russell Wilson has the biggest contract, so keep that in mind. And then whether Jackson Dart takes over partway through this season, or if Jameis Winston somehow wins this job or is able to have to go out there with injuries or whatever the case may be and just gunsling it around, Malik Neighbors is going to have at least a decent arm, a better arm than last year, throwing him the ball. So what kind of numbers can he put up? Number 9 is Christian McCaffrey, who is the jack-of-all-trades type of person in the NFL. Obviously had some injuries last year, didn't participate in a lot of the year, 50 carries, 202 yards, didn't score a touchdown. He is always a guy that is around the ball while you're on offense. He has 524 career receptions and 1,300 carries in his career. So he's always coming out of the backfield, running the ball, whatever the case may be, and has been number 1 or number 2 on fantasy lists for a few years. Still on the south side of 30 at 29 years old. It's how he bounces back. How is he going to bounce back after being injured all of last season, or basically all of last season? They just signed Brock Purdy to a long-term deal, so he's going to be the leader of this offense. We know at his best what Christian McCaffrey is, and he's the best player for fantasy football. So if he bounces back, I mean, you're taking the guy that's rated 9th right now, and if you get him at 9 and he plays like he normally does, you got the number 1 overall pick at number 9 or at the end of the first round, wherever you're drafting. So just understand, he may not be the same player. So it's a huge contingency on health, just like, most of the people are kind of hinged on. So just keep that in mind when you're picking him and consider who else is on the board. And rounding out the top 10 of ESPN's PPR leagues is Amon-Ra St. Brown, the wide receiver from the Detroit Lions. 115 receptions last year, 1,263 yards, 12 touchdowns. Can do a ton of different things with that offense. Goes down for a game or 2 a year, just about, or doesn't play, whatever the case may be. There's no super number 2 on this roster. Jameis Winston just had barely over 1,000 yards last year, so he just started coming out of his shell. He needs to continue to take a step, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, we'll get it eventually, is your number 1 guy here. Obviously, wide receivers are still a big part of fantasy football because teams are throwing it all over the field, and I don't foresee that changing a ton. Like I said, I see running backs kind of making their way back into that, effectiveness as far as them with Saquon having the year that he did last year, etc. But knows this offense. Jared Goff loves him. I mean, he's clearly the go-to guy. After Jameis Winston is your number 2, I mean, there's nobody on this roster that's a huge threat to take, receptions away. Tim Patrick, 31-year-old, was a Bronco for a very long time, 33 receptions last year. They drafted Isaac Tisala, who is a ginormous human being that came out of Arkansas. 3rd round, wasn't hugely productive in college, so again, whether he develops or not really sure. But as of right now, that is your top 10 in fantasy football for players. So just a little bit of a preview there, and then we'll get into a read here, and then we'll go straight into the conversation with the Gridiron Goddess, Susan Curran. We will be right back after the read. This episode is brought to you by the Massachusetts Pirates of the Indoor Football League. Looking for a family-friendly night out that's anything but boring? Experience the high-octane action of indoor football, where every seat makes you part of the game. With tickets starting as low as $18, even front row seats are affordable. Be a part of the excitement. If a game ball lands your way, you get to keep it. How cool is that? And then after the final whistle, stick around for an autograph session with the players for just $15. Don't miss out. This is football like you've never experienced before. Come see the game in the Songus Arena in Lowell, Massachusetts. And for ticket information, go to www.masspiratesfootball.com. Again, that's masspiratesfootball.com. Hello and welcome back to Loftside Bantr. And today we're getting into that time of the year where we're starting to look at fantasy football. And today I'm very excited to have Susan Curran, who's here, is the Gridiron Goddess, and she does a lot of things for beginners and women players, and she does a lot of great stuff in the community for fantasy football. Susan, thank you very much for taking the time today to come on with us.
I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
So, Susan, you're known as the Gridiron Goddess, and you say that fantasy football can be fun for even if you're not like football savvy. How is that kind of possible? How do you work with that with kind of beginners and stuff like that?
Honestly, it's a really great way to learn how the game is played. If you are watching a football game knowing like, oh, my player just caught a pass, that's going to get me a point. How did that pass happen? And then you can kind of think about, oh, this is what happened to make it happen. It's a really great way to learn the game of American football as you collect points for your players.
Perfect. So what if somebody doesn't know like all the jargon and stuff like that? How do you keep that from being kind of an intimidating factor?
The biggest thing is people have to be willing to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not willing to learn it, then you're not going to do well for fantasy football. But the barrier is pretty low because once you know what a pass, a run, you don't have to know all of the intricacies of football. You don't have to know what a cover two shell defense is. You don't have to know that your wide receiver is running an X route or a Y route with a dig. Like all of that stuff, that's like really intricate football knowledge, and you don't need that to play football. If you know what catching a pass looks like and you know what a run looks like, then you can pay attention to what's happening in fantasy football.
Now, did you create this for women specifically or just kind of beginners as a whole?
Women specifically was the initial idea because there's just not a ton of that. There is not a focused space for female beginners in the fantasy industry. It is a hodgepodge of fantasy football 101 articles from ESPN or Sleeper has them or whatever, but there's nothing that is aimed at women that takes you from beginning to end on like, here's where we start. Now you're at least ready to play. So to take all of those things and get it into one resource, that's the goal.
Was there a moment that you thought, okay, the space needs to be changed, and kind of what was that moment?
One of the things is I learned that 38% of fantasy football players are women. So where I don't remember the exact number, but millions of people in America play fantasy sports. Millions, tens of millions actually. But there's nothing aimed at almost half of that population to either get them playing or as a community that is bigger than 50 people in a Facebook chat group.
Right.
So that's the goal, is to provide a space for them.
Do players need to know all the players on the teams and all the team names and stuff like that to get started?
To get started, no. It is definitely helpful to get started, but if you have the willingness before you start playing to do some research about who did really well last year, who the top scorers were for fantasy particular the previous year. You don't need to know that now Deebo Samuel is the first wide receiver on the Commanders after being with the 49ers last year. If you can do a little research, you're totally fine to get going without knowing all of the teams and players.
What platform do you generally use for fantasy football? ESPN, Yahoo?
Sleeper is the one that I use the most. Okay. I started on ESPN when I first started playing. Sleeper came out. I still have my family league is still on ESPN. Sleeper has a much more friendly user interface, although they've done some updates recently where it's getting more busy and stuff. I'm not really a fan of the updates, but it's definitely the most user-friendly platform for me personally that I think.
Now, does one of those provide more insight for matchups or anything else like that? Is that kind of why you went to Sleeper, or just because it got more busy on ESPN?
No, it's mostly that's the leagues I was playing on moved to Sleeper, so I just followed it, and after using them both, I just like it better. And there were a couple other apps where I've one league that I'm in, we tried moving to one app and everybody was like, this is terrible. So we deleted the league before the year even started and moved because it was just so nobody liked it.
So what kind of things can they find on your website that will help, teach somebody kind of the fantasy football basics and stuff like that? What kind of things do you offer?
So the biggest thing is we're launching the Fantasy Football Decoded, a Gridiron Goddess's Guide, and that's my beginner ebook. It's 20 pages, 25 pages of just information on what you need, but put in a way that is relatable and fun. It's not just this is blah 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 blah. There's a little pop culture in it, so that is the big thing. And if you read the ebook and you're like, this is great, I want a little more personalized help, then you can choose to join our coaching groups. And you can either do a group coaching where you will be with other people, and it's almost like a webinar class where we'll cover certain topics and people can submit if they have questions. Or you can sign up for one-on-one coaching where you give me a questionnaire and you get 60 minutes with me, and I can either help you with draft prep, or I can help with what's a strategy, what are some questions you have. And that one-on-one coaching, you pay for 2 sessions. So you get one before the season and you get one mid-season so that you can prep for playoffs or things like that. The group coaching is a set of 3 group coaching sessions when you purchase that.
Okay, very cool. Now, do you have people that maybe are more veterans to fantasy football, approaching you and stuff like that?
Not yet. We've got really the goal is to get people who are true beginners, maybe women whose boyfriend is really into fantasy football, whose wife is really into fantasy football, and they're they're spending all this time doing this thing. Let me dip my toes in to see what it feels like, and if I want to play, if I don't want to play. So that's who we're aiming at, for who maybe they watch football on Sundays, or they're a super fan of one team, but they don't pay attention to the rest of the league. So they're like, oh, fantasy football would be a good way to pay attention to the rest of the league. So let me start playing that.
Fantasy football can get competitive really quickly, as you probably know. How do you help your audience have fun, even if they're not winning every week? How do you keep that fun factor to it?
I think the biggest part about that is just building in the community from the get-go. So as long as you are having even non-football conversations with people that you're in leagues with, the winning and losing part kind of becomes secondary. It's a game. We're here to have fun, but we're also here to build community and meet people. So if you can keep those 2 things separate, it makes it a little easier. Plus, I mean, some leagues have really fun rules for the losers and like things like that make it want you to like you can keep going even if you're not winning. It's like okay, well at least I want to try to get that number one overall pick in a dynasty league or whatever.
Right. So my dynasty league, I actually worked at a hotel in New Orleans, and we've all kept touch after that. My first year I joined, I had to pick out of a hat my keeper, and it was Steven Gostkowski, the kicker for the Patriots. And everybody wanted
a dynasty league with kickers.
Yep. Well, they were removed after that year because I won. And kickers are no longer involved, and the commissioner hates kickers and won't put them back. So my team name's always like something related to kickers, but I never get the vote to get them put back in.
So it's funny. So a lot of dynasty leagues don't do kickers. Very traditional redraft leagues do. There is one woman, I'll look her, I need to look her name up. It's escaping me right now, who like kickers is her thing. Like she ranks kickers and like that's what she does. Yep. And she's very good at it. I'll get the name for you and we can put in the show notes or something. But that's, if you do have kickers, we'll get you that resource. It's pretty awesome.
Can you tell us a time that you kind of had a moment where you just kind of knew something was going to happen and you had predicted it and it was like a huge victory, whether it's on the waiver wire or draft or whatever the case may be?
Yeah. So one of the things about playing fantasy football is that you strive for those moments where you're like, yes. And last season when I started my Gridiron Goddess Instagram, I started the waiver wire, and a lot of people for the waiver wire, it's like you're digging deep into stats and all this kind of stuff. And my waiver wire is just like, I call it the gut grab of the week, because it's like, let's look at available players, who's on the waiver wire, kind of look at some statistics, but mostly it's like, what am I feeling, right? How am I feeling this? And we were 2 weeks ahead on the Juwan Jennings grab for the 49ers. Ayuk had just gone down, and people were like, I don't know what's going to happen. Debo's going to be like Debo season. But, and I was like, I don't know. And so, yeah, I was 2 weeks ahead for the Juwan Jennings grab, and I felt pretty good about that. I actually was able, because of that, I recommended him 2 weeks in a row, because people didn't take the first week. I was like, hey, you should grab this guy. He was still on the waiver wires for the most part in lots of leagues, because you can look at the percentages of in how many leagues players are rostered, like percentage wise. And he was still way too low. So I was like, hey guys, like go get this guy. Right. And sure enough, that second week is he had that like 25-point game or something. So that was awesome. I felt good about that.
I had Juju Smith-Schuster before his like 200-yard game. I think I picked him up like 30 minutes before the game, and that was like, people were coming up to me at work and they're like, how did you know that was going to happen? I'm like, somebody's injured. I got to find somebody. That's kind of how it was.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Do you think platforms and leagues are doing enough to welcome new or non-traditional fantasy players? What could change with that?
I think the biggest thing is user interface. It can be very complicated to learn a platform. And that was one of the things that I liked about Sleeper, is it was like, here's the league, here's your team. The up on the top was great. They've convoluted it now because they've gotten into like sports betting and over-under betting and things like that. And so now there's like a weird homepage on the front and you have to like click over to get to your leagues and stuff. But the biggest thing is simplicity. And I actually know a woman who is in the process of developing a learning app for fantasy sports that is super simplified. It's literally like, here's the players, here's the positions, and all of the fluff is just gone, because that is a need for beginner players.
What message do you have to any woman or anyone really that is curious or unsure about jumping into the fantasy football world?
Just do it. That's the biggest thing. It's so much fun to watch the game on TV and to be connected to it in a different way than like, oh, this is my favorite team. Honestly, people ask me who my favorite team is, and I don't really have one. I mean, I grew up, I'm from the Austin area. I live in the Dallas area of Texas now. So it's like, I guess the Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
My wife's family was from Missouri, so like they're big Rams fans. And then when the Rams moved to Los Angeles, they like followed them. So there's Rams fans. So I like follow the Cowboys and the Rams pretty closely, but mostly my favorite team is whatever football player needs to perform.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's who I'm rooting for. It can be conflicting when I have like two wide receivers that are playing each other or whatever, but
right.
It's you don't have to have fandom for one team to make the games more interesting. So that's one reason that I really like it. So just do it. It feels intimidating, but once you get the basics,
mm-hmm.
Then it's wheels off. Let's go.
Right. We're probably gonna have to clear that with Nike if we can use just do it, but
right. Yeah.
So I was looking over your Instagram and stuff like that, and I saw that somebody I believe had asked you how many leagues you're in, and you said enough to make sure it's still fun. How many leagues is that?
Okay, so last year I did 11.
Wow.
And that was too many.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm doing 7 this year, maybe 8. And most of those are dynasty. So like the waiver wire is not a thing really in dynasty because players are mostly on rosters. So you're not really having to, it's like, who am I going to start this week? I'm not having to go dig. I think I'm in 3 redraft of those 7. I think 3 or 4 are redraft. So, yeah, I did 11 last year and that was too much. Because the other thing with that too is then you like diversify your leagues, then you have players who's like, to say for the Rams, if you had Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, but they're on different rosters, you're like,
right.
Who am I rooting for to be getting the ball right now? So definitely needed to drop back.
Yeah,
for this year.
That's where I'm in, I think 3, and that's when I start to get into, okay, I'm now rooting for, all right, I need there to be 100 points scored in this game and this person to have this many, but I need an interception at the end so the defense gets the point.
Yeah, exactly. It gets pretty convoluted.
Now, you did, so I have mentioned in my show that this show had joined Fantasy Turf War, and that's kind of where we connected. You were in it last year, and you're doing it again this year. What can I expect from Fantasy Turf War? What is there different about this league comparative to other? I know there's a bunch of, like, 64 teams spread over a bunch of different conferences and stuff like that, but what else do you see that's maybe a little different?
I think the ability that is actively integrated to collaborate, where it's like that is what's highly encouraged versus if you're doing a tournament. So it's technically a tournament, right? So there's 4 divisions of 16 teams. That was tricky. It was my first 16-team league. Drafting that is hard, but so that's one thing to be prepared for, is that it's a 16-team league. Players go very quickly,
right?
But the fact that collaboration and working with each other in order to help your businesses grow, being the point, is really great.
Like kind of like what we're doing right now, which is great.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to put you to the test a little bit, and you don't have to share everything with me since we may be in the same league. Who knows? But
who knows? Yeah.
So my big league that I'm in, the Dynasty League that I'm in, I have to start a rookie every week. So who are your rookies this year that are going to put up 1 billion points that I can put on my roster?
So y'all haven't had your draft yet?
Haven't had it yet.
What position are you drafting from?
I believe I'm going to be. Let me double check. I'm going to be 6th, and it's out of 12. So right smack dab in the middle.
Okay, right smack in the middle. So is it super flex? Is it one QB?
It's super flex. So we can have a second QB.
Okay.
As I had mentioned, no kickers. I'm not allowed to have a kicker. So the Patriots' new kicker is out.
Right. Well, and there was one team. Who was it? It was the Ravens that drafted a kicker this year in the last round.
Yep.
Which was the first time that's happened like in a really long time.
Right.
It's like they knew what was coming with Justin Tucker or something. So okay, so drafting at the 6th. So who's going to be gone? So probably Cam Ward since it's super flex. Genty, Hampton, Henderson, maybe Travion Henderson. You're probably going to be in the range to get one of those tight ends.
Okay.
Either Jalen Warren or Colston Loveland. People right now also, I mean, Travis Hunter. You might be able to get Travis Hunter depending on how people feel about what he's going to do. If he's going to play enough wide receiver snaps versus defensive snaps to actually be scoring. But he's playing as a wide receiver in camp right now. So
yeah, that's a tricky one, huh? Because you don't know if he's gonna.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ted McMillan for the Panthers is probably going to be your best bet at the 6.
Okay.
Omarion Hampton, if he falls, the running backs in this class are very good. So if Omarion Hampton falls, he is with the Chargers, who are they're a run first offense with Greg Roman and Harbaugh. And right now Najee is there. So it might be a slow start, but I predict by the end of the season, Hampton is going to be the full-time 3-down back there. So definitely shoot for Hampton there, Ted McMillan. Those tight ends have question marks. Loveland for the Bears is injured. I don't remember where Warren was drafted right now, but I think Loveland is going first. So I would stick with either Tet or Hampton if you could get them in that spot.
All right, I'll have to block all my competitors in my league to not listen to this so they don't take my strategy. So what about some overall sleepers? What are some people that you're hearing like are going to have either a better year or are just not regarded as being successful? Because I always say that if you draft well, and yes, you have to make moves throughout the year because of injuries and stuff like that, but if you draft well, you set yourself up for all those things. So where can we find those sleepers this year?
So I'm going to give you 3 very unsexy names.
Perfect.
Because it's just like, they're not these 3 guys, they're not people that you draft and you're like, yes, I've got this guy. There's no flair to their games, right? Mm-hmm. The first one is Darnell Mooney. He is opposite Drake London. He's later in the draft, and defenses have to be focusing on London, and Mooney gets open. He had some really successful games last year. Let me actually pull up his 2024 stats because he's like the epitome of a wide receiver 3-2/flex who consistently performs for you every week. And he just kind of is again under the radar. Okay, so he played 16 games last year. Mm-hmm. And he was a wide receiver 3, so top 36 wide receiver in all but 6 of those games.
Okay.
So he's scoring double-digit fantasy points almost every week for you. Now, obviously, there are some that don't, but for the most part, he's a really great flex player. One of the other names, again, not sexy, is Jacoby Myers. He is now the wide receiver 1 for Geno Smith in Las Vegas. He gets a quarterback upgrade by a lot in Geno Smith. And Geno Smith and Pete Carroll are now reconnected in Vegas, and they do well together. So again, same thing. Wide receiver 3, meaning he's a top 36 wide receiver out of, there's the bye week, out of 16 games played, same thing, only 4 worse than wide receiver 36 numbers. And that was as the wide receiver 2. He had Devontae Adams there last year. Now he's the wide receiver 1. They did draft a rookie in Jack Besh, but he's been playing with the second team. He's been taking snaps with the second team in OTAs, which is interesting. And Brock Bowers is obviously going to be the first target. He's going to be getting the most receptions. But for the wide receiver position, now it's Jacoby Myers. And then the other guy is Juwan Jennings. I brought him up earlier, but Ayuk is still going to be, he's probably not going to start the season. Or if he is, he's starting the season with the injury history. Ricky Pearsall certainly has the ability, now that he has a full off season, to get going with Brock Purdy. But Purdy and Jennings created a connection last year, and I expect that to carry over. Okay. So again, none of these guys are going top 5 rounds. So you can grab studs if you want and save these guys for flex positions.
What positions, let's eliminate quarterbacks for right now. What positions should people keen on more than others? Because we've seen football evolve over the years, actually probably more in the last 10 years. What positions do you think people need to look at, maybe grab an extra at that position?
So typically when you think about fantasy football, it's the running backs are going to get injured, right? So make sure that you grab either your handcuff, or meaning the backup player to your running back, it's the handcuff, or a high-end handcuff for another team's running back. Say Tyler Algier would be the handcuff for Bijan Robinson in Atlanta. And if Bijan goes down, Algier is going to get the work and is a decent back. He's a high-end handcuff. Last year, it was the wide receivers who went down. Wide receivers and quarterbacks, they were the ones getting injured last year. It was crazy. And so definitely one of those 2 skill positions. Personally, I like to grab an extra wide receiver, because most leagues that I play in are points per reception leagues, PPR leagues. So if you are in a PPR league, grabbing that extra receiver, or if there's a running back who is a pass catching running back, making sure that you grab one of them so that you get the best of both worlds there.
Is there anybody that has been a great pickup in fantasy football for the last couple of years, is now kind of maybe on that decline?
As much as I hate it, Cooper Kupp. He's changing teams. Last year didn't look great. I don't like to say that players are injury prone, but he does deal with at least he misses a couple games every year. And he's going to be 32, or is currently 32, which, unless you are an outlier of outliers, like Devontae Adams, that age changing teams generally does not do well. So him and then Stephon Diggs, those 2 guys who are powerhouses for several years, I think are going to be a disappointment this year.
So you picked Cooper Kupp, who's on my fantasy roster, and Stephon Diggs, who's on the New England Patriots. So I thank you very much for saying I shouldn't watch football.
Sorry. I love Cooper Kupp. It's so sad. He's just like a generally good human. Like when you watch interactions with him, and he's so football smart. So it like breaks my heart to be like, but Diggs with the injury,
right.
Yeah, I don't know, some off the field stuff. Hopefully, doesn't materialize.
Right. So where can they find you? Where can all of our listeners find your socials and everything else like that?
So my main platform is Instagram, but I am also on Threads and Blue Sky. It's all at Gridiron underscore Goddess. And then the website is thegridirongoddess.com. So, and that's where the ebook and the coaching is. I also do shirts and like custom shirts. So if you have a team, high school team, college team, where you get, I can change the colors, put the names in for you, put the names on the back. We have tumblers and stuff. Or little like desk size plaques for fantasy football championships too. If you want a custom, hey, I won my league, but you don't want to have, so you go to an office job, right? But you don't want to have the trophy, but you want just a little like small plaque thing. We've got those that can be customized for you as well. So
very cool. Well, Susan, I really appreciate your time. As I mentioned before, Susan and I are both in the fantasy turf war, so I'd love to have you back on kind of after the draft, midway through the season, and we can kind of go over some more fantasy football stuff. If we're in the same league, you can brag that you're probably beating me, which is fine.
I don't know. I did not do super well last year because I did not draft very well because it's my first time that I've been in a league that big, and like trades in a league with 16 teams. I don't know. I'm telling you, that 16 team adding what's crazy. So you think about it, you're like, oh, it's only 4 teams than normal, but that's like 48 players that now have to be, that are taken additionally. And so by the time you get to the last few rounds, you're just like in the dregs. You're like, I don't know. Here's Tommy Trimble, tight end for the Panthers. I don't like. It's just
I have one more question before we let you go. What kind of trader are you? There's a whole bunch of different types of people that trade in fantasy football. The ones that will throw anything and see if anything sticks. The ones that will all the lopsided. The ones that will auction off people. What kind of trader are you?
I'm generally a pretty conservative trader. My dynasty leagues are only 2 or 3 years old, and when I draft a dynasty startup league, I draft it like it's a win now league, because you never know if they're gonna fold, right? So I'm drafting to win the championship the first year or two, and I have a really hard time like sending players off for rookie picks and stuff.
Right.
So generally I'm a pretty conservative trader, but I do trade. I make more trades than definitely some other people in my leagues because it's more fun that way. It gets a little static, and sometimes the waiver wire just doesn't cut it, especially like in a redraft league. It's just not, it's like, I don't know. I don't really want these guys. Let me go make a trade. And it's more fun. So I do trade, but I'm more of a, let's make sure that it's really balanced for both of us versus trying to like, oh, I need to win this trade.
Gotcha.
Because there are definitely people who do that, but that is not me.
Yeah, I'll call him out because I hope he listens to this episode. We call him Chef Angel. He was a chef at my job in New Orleans. You know, after the draft ends, Angel, you don't have to say, hey, all these people are available. Like, we can sit on the draft picks for a minute and think that we're, like, going to be okay. But he's constantly...
We have a guy in our league like that.
Yeah. constantly trying to get people to trade, and then we can trade draft picks in ours. So
yeah.
Well, Susan,
Yeah,
again,
I have one guy who he's like, I'm pretty sure he traded himself out of a top 3 team this offseason. And like he traded one person to the league who he like won the championship last year, and his team is clearly stacked. He's like making this other team strong. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
But you know.
Susan, again, I very much appreciate your time. I very much appreciate your insight. And, you know, if we're matched up, like I said, good luck to you. If you're in a different part of the league, again, still good luck to you. And we'll keep in touch and hopefully have you back on. Yeah, you
too. I hope we are in the same league together.
Yeah.
It's fun to interact with everybody. Right. So I hope that happens.
Thank you very much for your time. I very much appreciate it. She's the Gridiron Goddess, Susan Curran. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And once again, I want to thank Susan Curran, the Gridiron Goddess, for her time. Like I said, fantasy football right around the corner. You should be having your drafts, or at least they should be set up, or you should at least have the idea who's actually in your league. So you can catch Susan and I at Fantasy Turf War, which is a massive 64 teams broken up into 4 different divisions, and you'll be able to see hopefully some more with her a little bit later on, and then more with the Fantasy Turf War other competitors as well. Myself here at Loftside Bantr, really looking forward to it. We'll shift gears a little bit here, and we'll talk about the 2 greatest words in the English language when it comes to sports and the playoffs, and especially championship games, and that is Game 7. It all comes down to this for the NBA Finals. The Pacers won Game 6 going away. They were back at home. Now they're going to be back in Oklahoma City tonight. Hopefully I have this episode out in time for that. It should be. But Game 7's, every little thing matters a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. A turnover, a missed shot, going on a run, getting into foul trouble. All of these different things are magnified by quite a bit. We talk about the playoffs, and we talk about the championships, and we talk about all these different things that in these situations, everything's magnified. Everything's a little different. Everything you kind of look back to. In a Game 7 scenario where it's win or go home, and I've said many times why we like the NCAA tournament and why we like all these different things is it is a win or go home scenario. You have one shot to do this. Now, in a best-of-7 series, typically speaking, the better team comes out on top. I've said all along that Oklahoma City is the better team. They're still here. It's a Game 7, so they have to win. But this is boiled down to now everything counts for this. The way you play, the decisions that you're making, the way that you're being coached, the way that the crowd's in it, everything else matters with this. Because there's no tomorrow. There's no instance to go, hey, we just don't have it tonight. We can come back tomorrow and be better. That doesn't exist. Because the season's over after tonight. So, Game 7 in Oklahoma City, Thunder versus the Indiana Pacers. It's going to be a hell of a game. Make sure you're there to see it because, again, for a series that had 2 smaller market teams that maybe didn't have the cachet of an LA or a Boston or a New York or Dallas or any of these bigger markets, it certainly has lived up to what we as basketball fans want to see. So, again, tonight, Game 7 of the NBA Finals. We'll have a full kind of recap of Game 7. I should have the episode out hopefully Tuesday. I'll record it tomorrow. And then we have it there for you so that way you can hear all the analysis, at least from me. And then kind of what to expect with the early part of the offseason coming up. Draft is right around the corner again, which is great. I heard there's a lot of rumblings with teams that want to move up, including the Boston Celtics. I think you're going to start seeing some moves to kind of shape a roster and everything else like that. So again, we thank you all for listening, no matter where you are, whether it's morning, afternoon, or night. You have a good one, and we will see you on the next show.